Hi everyone, I'm Angela Lynn.
And I'm Jesse Lynn, and welcome back to another episode of But Where Are You Really From? This week, we thought we would talk about creative pursuits and why they're so fun to go after. And so maybe I will get started talking a little bit about myself, because you guys know I'm a little bit more of the quiet contributor here. But while we were away on break, I started a new creative pursuit, I guess, which was just doing pottery. I used to do this as a kid for fun. And I think after a while of doing work and the pod, I was like, I really need to find something else that's just kind of like creative freedom in a sense, where I can just really play and do whatever, and there's no pressure or expectations or anything attached to it. And so that's something that I've been doing over the last few months. And I have to say that it's been a pretty good experience so far. Just like some time to myself, really just free form thinking about whatever I want and having the ability to actually it was a really good one for me because I feel like I'm a really impatient person. So it was like perfect fit because I was like, oh cool, I have this thing that I can just like shape however I want. And then if I don't like it, I can just smash it. But then like if it's something cool, I can keep like working on it. So it was like really like I think a nice spot for me in terms of like artistic freedom. So that's basically what I've been working on so far. What about you, Angela? Creative pursuits, projects? You definitely have.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like yours is the fun, quote unquote, fun creative pursuit because it's not for anything else. I feel like I've done nothing but creative pursuits really since like leaving corporate America. The podcast started as a creative pursuit. It was not for any real reason except for us to have a hobby to do and made me learn GarageBand and Premiere Pro and Illustrator and all these different creative programs, which then lent themselves to help me a lot with creating Real You Mandarin. And like that whole course and everything I'm creating for it now is like made up for my head. So if like in that respect, it's all like a creative pursuit. But I think yours is the like truly just for fun kind of thing. I don't think I have anything. Well, that's not true, I guess. I just am not doing it on the same cadence as you, but I've been on and off like baking more recently as well, just like for shits and giggles as well. So, like, whenever we have close to rotten bananas, I'm like, it's banana bread time.
Ooh,
And,
yummy.
like, yeah. Yuki's birthday, by the time you're hearing this, already passed, but by the time we're recording this, it's in 2 days, and I'm going to make her a little cake because dog things aren't that complicated anyway. I can't eat that many human grade things. So it's going to be like a banana peanut butter oat flour.
Do you feel like you get the same kind of enjoyment out of doing that versus like the Real You Mandarin stuff?
I was trying to like separate what you're doing with a pottery versus what we've done with like the podcast or what I'm doing with Really Mandarin because both are creative, but one is just for fun, right? And like has no expectations attached to it, is really to like help you relax or like release stress or whatever. That's kind of the same way I view like baking. And I mean, I do have expectations to some extent where I'm like, I hope it turns out well, but like my world's not going to crash. I'm not trying to sell it. Like there's nothing external really attached to it, but it brings me joy to create something from nothing and see it turn into something and hopefully something delicious and that's I can enjoy and maybe brings happiness to Ramon or to Yuki or whatever.
Another question that I always think about when we talk about creative pursuits is like, do you get more fulfillment or enjoyment out of the final product, or is it like the journey that really matters for you? Because for me, I feel like sometimes when I'm doing stuff, it's like the final output, once I'm done with it, I'm like, ooh, I don't want to touch that anymore. And I kind of feel the same way when I do like art stuff. Like when I get to a point where I'm like, I'm done, I hate revisiting it. And so I much more enjoy like the middle parts of it when I'm working on stuff and I feel like I'm in a flow versus like the final thing, if that makes sense.
For me, for like baking or cooking or whatever, like I think there's a fine balance. Like parts of it I really enjoy because it is making you use a different part of your brain than you usually do during your like day, like normal day, right? Like I'm not Sometimes I'm even listening to a podcast or like music or whatever, or watching a show while I'm cooking. So it lets me kind of like shut off the otherwise like very focused trying to like problem solve part of my brain that I'm using the rest of the day. So I can enjoy that process a little bit, but it can get annoying if it's like a very long process. And then once it's reached like past 45 minutes or something of doing something, I'm like, okay, this is getting annoying. Like, let's just get to the part where I can enjoy the like end product.
Hard pivot. Like, how do you decide to go after like new creative pursuits? So like, why did you choose to do baking versus like you've done drawing in the past, you've done other stuff in the past. Like, why did you decide to do food?
Creativity and magnetism towards wanting to do something creative is also a very big aspect of what it is to be human. And that is kind of hard to explain, like where that drive comes from. So for me, like if in the moment my current thing is baking and then it switches to something else, for me, it always has like an element of like unspoken, just like magnetism towards something where it's like, oh, I feel like kind of compelled to do this, or like I suddenly have this like really strong urge to do this thing, or like I can't stop thinking about it, or it'll a lot of times it'll be something like I've thought about doing for a long time, and then like finally I have this like inner push inside of me where I'm like, just fucking do it already. Like you've been thinking about it for so long, just do it. And that was the same thing, even though I just tried to separate like the fun, creative, like pure fun, creative pursuits like baking and your pottery stuff from like work kind of things like Real You Mandarin. But I started that because I also had this like really strong push, like invisible push kind of from the universe or from like inside of me or whatever, where I was like, this thing should exist and I'm annoyed it doesn't exist and I don't want to do it. But then it's like, oh, well, no one else is going to do it, so you need to do it. Like, so I had this like strong push in me for that as well. And yeah, for the baking stuff, it's like, I mean, yeah, you mentioned drawing and stuff. I do fluctuate between creative pursuits, and I think I fluctuate because it literally depends on like my mood or like whatever invisible thing is like pushing me towards it. It's not really explainable per se. You've heard me complain about how weird it is to be an American-born Mandarin speaker because I grew up speaking Mandarin at home and have a passing native accent, but simultaneously sound like a child when trying to talk about real things. Since I realized no one out there was catering to people like us and decided, I'm just going to do it myself. I teamed up with my native Taiwanese Mandarin language teacher to create Real You Mandarin, a self-paced online Mandarin course built specifically for ABCs and ABTs. All of our content is video-based, realistic dialogues centered on topics you'd actually want to talk about, from dating and pop culture to media representation and growing up as a minority in a majority society. You'll learn the relevant vocabulary in the context you actually use them and be able to practice them daily with pre-built digital flashcards. You'll also be able to practice speaking by shadowing, repeating back, or following along with all of these dialogues to practice speaking at natural speed with the right pronunciations. Check out the course at realumandarin.com and get 10% off using promo code WhereAreYouFrom10. Let us help you express the real you when you speak Mandarin. Hey listeners, wondering how you can support us? The biggest way is by increasing our visibility by following us on Instagram at WhereAreYouFromPod, on TikTok at But Where Are You Really From, subscribing to our YouTube channel under But Where Are You Really From Podcast, rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, and telling your friends. The more people we can get to listen to the show, the more we can continue spotlighting different perspectives and stories. And if you feel so inclined, we're also accepting donations at buymeacoffee.com/whereareyouFrom. Thanks, y'all.
I also felt the same way about exploring this pottery thing. And I think that's what's so interesting about like new creative pursuits or like doing the pod or doing Real You Mandarin that you mentioned. It's just kind of like springs out of nowhere. And you just feel like this drive that you have to like go and do it. And it's like important, right? Like I feel like there was a while where I just wasn't doing anything artistic for myself. Like the pod is like a partnership between us, so I didn't really see it as like this is a Jesse thing. And then it just felt like I had nowhere to express something and I like really needed to do it. And picking that was better than anything else that I had been trying in the past. It just like felt correct.
There's a reason art has existed forever, from the cavemen, finger paintings through the most like crazy AI art that's happening now. Like, it is a form of expression and an expression of the human essence that a lot of times can't be put into words because you wouldn't even know. Like, I'm staring at your bowl of the hands that like pottery that you have in the back that you told me you were working on. Yeah, for those who are watching in video, Jesse, you made this pottery piece that like looks like a bowl, but it's like a bunch of arms and like hands sticking up. It's almost like a crown kind of. Yeah. So I've been staring at that and it's like, I mean, that obviously is an expression of you, but if you were to put into words like why you made that and whatever, it loses something. That's like not the point, right? So creativity and art and all these like different, the other half of the way of like expressing yourself is so important because it is that kind of like unspoken or like words are not capable of capturing side of the you that you want to like put out into the world.
And then I think one of the things that you have tied to some of your creative pursuits is it's also kind of like a career pursuit. So one of the questions that's always sat on my mind, because you see, at least I have, like historically, you see all these articles about like people and founders who are like so passionate about what they do and they like love every day of like their company and building their business. And I've always had in my mind like, wow, can you really be creatively satisfied by your career? Kind of what you were saying with like problems. Like, I go to my job every day and I solve problems, and I think that requires a spark of creativity. It requires you to think creatively, but I don't necessarily see it as creative expression. And so for me, like, while I am fulfilled in some aspects in my career, it doesn't give me quite the same sparkle, if that makes sense. I don't know. What about you?
Very loaded question because I have been, since I started trying to make money in my life in general, I've always wanted to marry the two, the like my passions or like personal interests with the way I'm gonna make money. So, and I distinctly remember my parents and my aunt making a whole like point of it when I was 15 and wanted to go into the music industry, like working at record labels and stuff. They're like, why are you trying to make your hobby your job? Like, just have a hobby on the side. Like, have a job and then have a hobby on the side. Like, why do you have to like mix the two? So I think it's a little question for me, but I do think just now that I've like tried to do it many ways, I think it's a glorious goal to have something that you are passionate about that also makes money, but I think it's unrealistic for a lot of people. So I think it's one of those things that's like, the more the media portrays this like idealized romance through love stories and rom-coms and stuff, the more unhappy you are in comparing your like actual romantic life because you have expectations of things being a certain way. I think it's similar to that when you hear these like one-off stories of like founders who like truly are, I don't go to work a single day in my life because every day is amazing. Like, that's just not the reality for most people. And I think we've talked about it a lot as we've gotten older, right? Especially going into 30s. It's kind of like, does that even need to be the case? Like, so many of us are like, I have a job that pays money, that pays for my life, and then it allows me to enjoy other parts of my life, and that's fine. And I think many people are okay with that. So I think it's really hard to mix the two in a really nice way because money just corrupts everything, sadly. Like, I will say, like even this podcast, we've been doing it for so long, and like whenever I've tried to pursue things around like monetization, it honestly just like makes me frustrated and it's like kind of removes some of the joy of like just doing the podcast for the point of doing the podcast, which is for us to like talk about stuff and like explore different topics. So yeah, I think it's very hard for most people to find a way to marry true like creative passion with making money. Money is just corrupt.
I think I agree, unfortunately. I don't know if it's necessarily a money issue, but just kind of the complications of having your passion, your art, your creativity at the forefront of many other competing interests. So I even think of like artists who are sold at like Sotheby's or something like that. Yes, like even if you are famous, you sell well, you have money, you don't necessarily need to touch the business side of things. I also think about like that relationship between the artists and people who consume their work, right? There must be some part of the public reflection on a piece of work that impacts how an artist feels. So if I put out a piece and I'm like really proud of it and everyone's like, yeah, this sucks, or it doesn't sell, to your point, I think it'd be really hard not to take that kind of personally, to be like, wow, you guys don't understand my artistic vision, or you don't understand like how I'm expressing or emoting or feeling in this piece. So I think, yeah, those like added layers of complication when your creativity or your artistry is up for consumption, I guess is a better way to say it, makes it really hard to feel as joyous about it, because then you have to think about like all these other things, like the money part of it and like what other people are thinking. And yeah, I think is part of why having an artistic pursuit that's just like fully for joy is so fun, because you can really just have it for yourself or whoever you want to share it with, but you kind of control like how you express that joy and who you want to like let in to be a part of it.
Agreed.
Nice. Well, listeners, thank you for joining us this episode. We would love to hear from you. What are some creative things that you guys are working on? I mean, you guys have seen us on the pod for a while now. You've seen us talk about our own creative pursuits and ventures. We'd love to hear from you. See and hear whatever you're doing, whether it's drawing, pottery, woodworking, plumbing, electricity, whatever. You know, your amateur plumbers out there. Let us know in the comments wherever you're listening to this.
Yes, and come back next week because we will have another fresh episode for you then. And until then,
再见, bitches.